Uh, right. Good afternoon and welcome to this Tuesday session where I'm pleased to be talking to Simon Raybould. Dr. Simon Raybould is the author of Presentation Genius and is a presentation skills trainer. Good afternoon, Simon.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. I love these chats because I never know where they're going to go. And I throw my question list out the window and things just take off, which is absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I mean, we've known each other a while now, over 10 years. And
We have, yes. Most of it seemed to make some kind of sense at the time, but
it did. And we're still connected and still talking, which
it's good.
is pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, today we're going to talk about presentation nerves. So I'm going to start at the beginning and ask you a very simple question. What is a presentation?
Okay. It's usually assumed to be something to do with business, where you have to get some information across to people, where it's a one-to-many live presentation. So there's one person at the front of the room and more than one person in the audience, so to speak. So typically we assume it's going to have slides, but it doesn't have to. And typically we assume it's going to be to do about work, but again, it doesn't have to. Anything after that is open for debate. Formats, everything else is up in the wind. What software you use, whether you use software, all of those kinds of things are up in the air. But it's actually a slightly more complicated question than it sounds, because I describe myself as a presentations trainer, not a public speaking trainer.
Right.
And it's one of those things where it's hard to describe the difference, but you know it when you see it. Public speaking is more often done for entertainment or for fun or in a public environment, and presentations tend to be done much more, and this is my definition, tend to be done much more in a business environment. So you may be working to colleagues, or for a presentation might be for a raise or to report progress on a project or ask for funding, that kind of thing.
So a closed environment where the guests know what to expect.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. A relatively closed environment. Although even that's blurry. I mean, for example, the last presentation I did was to a group of personal assistants.
Yeah.
Me in a room of 45 personal assistants. That's a terrifying, terrifying environment. And even that wasn't quite a closed environment, because although they all belonged to the same organization, anybody from that organization could have come along. So it was a semi-closed environment, perhaps, but it went well. It was good. Although I did at one point, I was grateful for the fact that I was closer to the door than my audience were. So that's always a good thing to check.
Yeah. We also, I just want to extend this slightly in light of who is watching us. Anybody who's presenting a show on Blab where they're giving out information with a call to action is doing something that's similar, not the same, but similar. Because we're going out now and we're live to up to 35 people. We're going to be presenting this on Blab and on YouTube and on Facebook. And we're actually speaking live. And the topic of today, which affects a lot of people who use Blab, is nerves.
It does. And it's not just for presentations as well. It's for interviews or any challenging life environment.
Right. Okay. Now, why do we get nervous?
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah.
That's easy because we are taking risks, and it matters to us. We have a mantra in the company: the day you stand up to make a presentation and you're not nervous, that's kind of the day after you should have quit.
Right.
Because nerves are just an indication that something matters to you. If you're not nervous, then clearly you don't care about the presentation, you don't care about the outcome, you don't care about what the audience think of you, in which case, why are you giving a presentation? And that's a bit reductionist and a bit simplistic of me to say that, but basically I'm kind of comfortable with the idea that people should get nervous because it's an indication that what they're doing matters to them. And we get nervous because we're sticking our head outside of the tribe. We're evolutionarily designed to go with the pack, because if we do what everybody else does, we ain't going to get killed. If everybody else is drinking from that stream and we drink from that stream, that's a good idea, because if they're all not dead, then clearly that stream's not poisoned. So it makes sense to do what everybody else does. And yet to stand at the front of the room and tell people that you know more than they do, that's stepping outside of the tribe, if you like. That's That's taking risks. That's drinking from the stream over here, which might be poisoned. That's a horrible analogy. I should have worked that one through before I started with it. You get the idea.
Well, we're going outside our own comfort zone, aren't we?
We are very, very much so. And it's professional speakers do it all the time. Their comfort zone is the stage. And that's perhaps one of the reasons I prefer to work with presenters, because they, for example, might be a brilliant accountant, but they now have to make presentations about accounting, for example. And all their training is to be an accountant, not to be a presenter and not to be a speaker.
So these two schools of presenters, those who do it as a profession and those who do it because, for want of a better word, they've either been pushed into it, they want to get the word out. And it's the second group that you specialize in.
That's right, yeah. I've nothing in particular against the first group. I mean, there are examples in the first group of where they're speaking for the sake of hearing their own voice, and I don't have any time for that kind of person. But in general, I don't have anything against those people. It's just that I can be more used to more people by concentrating on the, in inverted commas, reluctant presenter. That's a horrible phrase, but
No, it describes it succinctly.
Yeah.
It's somebody who has to present and wants to present, but is afraid and they have nerves. Now, what steps can they take? Can we take? Can I take?
Okay. First things first, remember it's normal. Okay, so that's a kind of, you're not alone. Don't panic if it all feels going horribly wrong. But in the spirit of true professionalism, I've got an audio visual aid. Is that legible to everybody?
It is, yeah. We can see that confidence one way and nervousness the other. Yes.
Yeah, and part of the problem is that people elide those two ideas, and they get confused because they get very, very nervous, and they think that means that they're not feeling very confident.
Okay.
And one of the first things I want people to do is to ask themselves a question: actually, genuinely, am I really scared, or is it just that I'm nervous?
Right.
Because there's a difference between the two, if you see what I mean. As a speaker, as a presenter, I would always want to be both nervous and confident. I don't want the nerves to go away, and I'm hedging my bets a little bit here when I say things like nerves are caused by not being sure about what you're doing, and confidence is caused by knowing that even if it goes wrong, you can cope with it.
Right.
Does that make sense? So I go on stage and I'm still nervous because things could go wrong. I'm nervous now because I don't know what questions you're going to ask me. I'm also confident because I know that whatever questions they are, I'll almost certainly have an answer. So I'm nervous and confident at the same time, if that makes sense.
Right.
So one of the first things I want people to do is just ask themselves, are they nervous, are they confident, or are they anxious? So it's a whole melange of things all mixed in together.
Right. Okay. So what steps can people take before the presentation?
Before the presentation, right? That's a really good question, because most people leave it until it's a bit too late. So that's a really astute observation. About 3 years ago, we had let's pretend it was a team meeting. Okay.
Yeah.
It looked suspiciously like a couple of carrots of red wine and a pizza, but let's pretend it was a team meeting.
We will.
Okay. And we went round the table and we asked each other what it was that makes us nervous as trainers and speakers.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to do this. I know it's impossible to do this, but we made our best guess as to where our nerves were apportioned. So what percentage of our nerves was caused by this, what percentage of our nerves was caused by that, and so on. Now, for us, we reckon that up to a third of our nerves, and this number will be different for everybody, but for us, about a third of our nerves was caused by little bits of anxiety about the technical, the things that could go wrong.
Right.
Am I going to get there on time? Do my slides work? Have I remembered my HDMI adapter? Are my shoes clean? Have I got a spare shirt in case I spill on it over coffee, or all of that kind of thing? So what we did, and it's something I commend to everybody, is just write yourself a very simple checklist.
Okay.
About 2 weeks before you go out, 2 weeks before the presentation, you sit down and you go, of all the things that could go wrong, just list them. Right. And then before you go to the presentation, you go through that list and you go, have I checked this? Tick. Have I checked that? Tick. Have I checked the other? Tick. It's the simplest tool on the face of the planet. It's so embarrassingly simple that most people don't want to use it because they don't believe it works. Our experience is very much that it does. It means you go on stage and you know that you've got all the right handouts, you've got the technical stuff sorted out. It's the little things that a professional will do without thinking about it.
Yeah.
But we don't work with professionals. And our an in-house joke, and I always warn people about in-house jokes, but our in-house joke is to call these lists ties and flies.
Okay, yeah.
Because the last thing on the bottom of the list, the last thing that gets checked before I go on stage.
Okay.
Tie fastened.
Yeah.
Now, I've never yet gone on stage with my flies not fastened or my tie crooked, but there's there's always a first time that it could happen. So we reckon that for us, about a third of our nerves comes there, and even if it doesn't solve the nerves problem, at the very least, it means that your audience is going to be confident, or you're going to be confident that all the little technical things that could go wrong are going to be sorted out. So it's things like, have I got fresh batteries in my microphone? Tick. All those little technical givens. So before you get there, just list all the things that could go wrong and make sure they don't. It's as simple as that, really. Embarrassingly simple.
And you also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, the other thing you were going to say.
Well, the other thing is the one that everybody shies away from is just, for goodness sake, practice. The number of people who don't rehearse before they go on stage is just never ceases to amaze me. And I know why they do it. It's because practice feels really, really awkward, and you get nervous and embarrassed talking to yourself or talking to the cat or talking to the mirror. And I get that, I understand that. But even if you only do one run through, please, it's worth it. But I want to differentiate here between rehearsing and practicing.
Okay, what's the difference?
Rehearsal is a process. Practice is something you do within that process. Now, there's all kinds of semantics you can play with, so let's not get hooked up on whether that's the right terminology. But Stephen, do you play any musical instruments at all?
I would if I could. No, I don't. But
nothing at all. No. Okay. No. I'm sure there's somebody in that list of
attendees. There'll be somebody watching this who will.
Okay, so somebody's going to watch it. But I played in an orchestra for a while, and I want you to imagine the conductor sat us down to play the Beethoven Fifth Symphony. Okay, it's the one that everyone knows that starts off da 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 dum, da 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 dum. Right. Okay. Yeah. What he did not do was start at movement 1, bar 1, play it all the way through to the end, and then go, bar 3 was a bit dodgy, fellas. Let's go back to bar 1 and play it all the way through again.
Okay,
right? That's just a waste of time. It's not what people should be doing. It's what most people actually do when they practice and rehearse, but it's not very efficient. So what we suggest is you go through it once, you find out what doesn't work,
right?
And you go back for that bit, and you do that bit over and over and over until the weakest bit of your presentation becomes effectively the strongest because you've done it again and again and again. Yeah. And then you go to the second weakest bit of your presentation, and you make that then the strongest.
Right.
Which means, for example, if you're working as an actor, you might find that the director rehearses some scenes. They just do it once. They just go through it, and because that scene works and there are no problems in it, they never go back to that scene. But there are other scenes, key critical scenes with lots of technical bits and lots of emotion and all of that kind of jazz. They might go over that scene 30 or 40 times and really take it to pieces. And that's what I mean about the difference between rehearsing and practicing. Rehearsing is the entire process.
Yeah.
Practicing is that thing you do where you go over it and over it and over it and over it until you lose the will to live.
Yeah. I mean, of course, the whole process is something that comedians now undertake because they do huge stadiums gigs, don't they?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Their presentation's got to be spot on. And they start off in the small clubs.
They start in the small clubs. There's a friend of mine lives in Didcot, and she absolutely adores it because these large... Dara O'Brien, for example, just played there because they test out their new material. And the reason she loves being in Didcot is because it's close enough to London to mean that these comedians come out, do the gig, and can go back to London.
Yeah.
far enough away for them want to come out, because they get away from the London bubble, as it were, and practice in the real world before they go back. So she gets to see all kinds of comedians with almost no money involved at all. It's great because, you know, she gets to see them for 10, 15, 20 quid, whereas they do the big stadium gigs and their tickets are absolutely... But they rehearse in the same way. They create the material and then they test it and they take out the bits that don't work and they replace it with something else and they swap it around and all of that kind of jazz. So comedians, musicians, dancers, all kinds of performers rehearse in the same way. They don't just practice it. They rehearse with intent.
Right. Okay. And they rehearse with the crowd. Now, as a single presenter...
That's the best way of doing it. Let's work on that. And the beauty of doing that, of course, is that you no longer need 3 hours to practice your presentation. Okay. You can go, I've got 10 minutes. What can I sensibly do in that 10 minutes?
Right.
I've got this bit of the presentation that doesn't work. Can I break the back of that presentation bit in 10 minutes? Yes. If I can't, could I break the back of this problem in 10 minutes? Yes. So you focus on the weak bits just for a little bit. And of course, when you're at the end of your presentation rehearsal process and you've got it all sorted out, sure, then you run through it a couple of times just to make sure that everything flows. Okay. But there's no point in just rehearsing it mindlessly over and over and over. I've just realized that either my camera isn't working properly or there's a lag on the line, because when I do that, I finish the gesture a good 3 or 4 seconds before my camera catches up with me. It's really disconcerting.
Blab is wonderful if you don't move.
Oh, now he tells me.
No, it is a lag, and you're quite right, and you've seen it. We don't see as much of a lag from here.
I think of course, because it's coming back to me, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, yeah. The thing is, just occurred to me that in terms of people rehearsing, they could in fact use Blab as part of the process, because you can now do an unlisted Blab.
Yeah.
Nobody can see you.
Sometimes that's a good plan. I wouldn't like necessarily to suggest it too much for 2 reasons. The first 3 reasons. The first is that sometimes you can't concentrate because the technology takes up too much of your brain.
Okay. Yeah.
The second is that it's only showing your face. Okay, so if I go to the back of the room, yes, you can see me there, but I don't get a good picture. And the third is the Hawthorne Effect kicks in horribly, horribly, horribly. Come across the Hawthorne Effect?
I've got to ask, what's the Hawthorne Effect?
Oh, okay. Now, there's a lot of argument about whether this actual research genuinely happened or not, but the story goes that a bloke walks into the Hawthorne factory in America and notices that the lighting level is very low, says to the people that are on the shop floor, would you produce more if I increase the light level? And they say yes. So he increases the light level and productivity goes up. And then he says, I notice your break pattern looks like this. Would you be more productive if we changed your rest and breaks and shifts and things? And they say yes. So he changes the okay. And he makes lots and lots and lots of changes. And every time he makes changes, productivity goes up.
Yeah.
And after a while, he starts to make changes in the opposite direction. So he starts to say things like, I've noticed the lights are very, very bright. Would your productivity go up if we dim the lights a little? And people go, yes. So he dims the lights and productivity goes up. And eventually he gets to the point where the working conditions are worse than they were before they started, if you saw what I mean.
Yeah.
And it turns out, actually, that it's not the lighting or anything. It's the process of being asked. It's the process of being engaged.
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm getting at here, after that long, long ramble, is that as soon as you put a camera in front of people, their behavior changes. The process of being observed changes their behavior. Now, not for everybody and not always, but you need to be very careful with tools like Blab or videoing yourself, because often what you end up with is a recording of what you're like in front of a camera, which is not necessarily the same as what you're like in front of a live audience.
Understood.
Yeah.
I'm glad I asked the questions for 2 reasons. One, when you said Hawthorns, I thought West Bromwich Albion, so I won't get confused on that again. And the second, I do take your point that you want to do rehearsals in as near to the same conditions as you can do the presentation.
Yeah, often. not, sometimes you can just isolate a little technical bit and practice that. So, for example, there's a slide combination. You could practice that in front of your computer. But in an ideal world, by the time you get to the end of the rehearsal process, when you're going through things, certainly you want to be doing that in the ideally, you'd want to be doing that in the conditions that you're delivering in. So I know speakers who, for example, before a big gig, not only make a point of going to the venue, but they even dress the same way as they're going to be wearing for the big gig. Now, I don't go that far. I don't have enough shirts to be able to do that, for starters. But it's not unknown for me, for example, to rehearse in a tie. And certainly, if I know I've got a big gig, if I've got a big gig coming up, I might rehearse with. If I know they're going to make me wear one of these little Madonna mics.
Yep.
For anybody over the age of 40, that makes sense. For anybody else, think of Britney Spears, right? Britney Spears, a Madonna tribute act.
Right.
Well, we get struck off for that. I would wear, for example, if I was rehearsing, I might wear the battery pack, because that's the bit that I find most uncomfortable. And I wear that until I forget about the battery pack. But to be honest, that's the kind of thing that professional speakers need to worry about. It's not the kind of thing that lawyers, solicitors, accountants, doctors, whatever need to worry about, because they're not working in big stadiums. They're working in their offices and that kind of stuff. I mean, they can still rehearse in their office if they could book out the room where they're going to be making the presentation the day before and spend an hour in there. And I recommend they do that. If nothing else, they then check that the technology works and all of that kind of jazz. But it's not the end of the world if you don't. And if you can't, there's a very simple tool, which is to rehearse in lots of different venues. So you become, for lack of a better term, venue agnostic. So if you might want to rehearse in a small room, and then in a very big room, and a different small room, and a different big room, until you don't care where the hell you are. so that whatever room you go into, you're kind of you're okay.
Can you show your graph again?
What, this one? This remarkably professional piece of work.
Professional confidence and nerves. Right. Okay. Now let's get down to it. If you're going to do a presentation, how much do you need to know about the topic you're presenting to be confident?
Okay. I came across a great definition the other day of the definition of an expert witness in a court of law is somebody who knows more than everybody else in the room. That's it. That's the only definition there is.
Right, okay.
I'm a little bit more skeptical of that. I've read research that suggests anything from between 7 to 32 times more than your audience.
Yeah.
Knowing 32 times more than your audience sounds like an awful big ask for an awful lot of people. But certainly you need to be able to know an awful lot more about them. And it's one of the reasons I don't like presenting other people's materials. In fact, I refuse point blank to present other people's materials, because within the best will in the world, if the presentation goes completely linear like it's supposed to, that's okay. But if anybody asks me even a single question sideways, I've got no breadth to cover it. Okay. So the advice I would normally give people is to think of worst case scenario. If people ask you really dumb questions, really sideways and unusual questions, you need to be able to answer sideways questions all the way down the length of your presentation, and that's quite a big ask. On the other hand, if you don't know what you're talking about, if you're not the expert at the front of the room, you shouldn't be making the presentation in any case. It's not hard to know lots more than your audience. It's hard to know lots and lots and lots more than your audience, but it's not hard to know lots more. Personally, I would say somewhere about 10 times more than your audience is the safety net. But I have to stress that for all that I spent 24 years as a research scientist, and I normally stick to the research science, that figure I've just given you there is a personal experience one. It's not anything I've read any research about. Right.
Understood. But it's there. You do have to know more than your audience.
Lots more than your audience.
They won't. I mean, they've come to listen to somebody who knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a dirty trick that can help, which also helps with people's nerves, is to use something called presenter view. Now, that used to be PowerPoint's best kept secret. I think more and more people are catching on to it now, thank heavens. But it's a way of setting up PowerPoint or Keynote where what the audience sees on the big screen is different to what you see on the laptop in front of you.
Okay.
And that means you can put an awful lot more information on your laptop than up on the screen. Okay. So up on the screen, I would just have an image with maybe a couple of words, but on the laptop, you can set it up so that you can see the current slide and the next slide, a timer, and the clock, so you know where you are in your presentation time-wise.
Right.
At the bottom, you can have loads and loads of notes. Now, I recommend those notes are in keyword format rather than essay format, because it makes it easier to read that way.
Yep.
But it does help tremendously in dealing with your nerves, because you no longer have to worry about what the hell's coming up next. You know? And it just makes you look so much slicker.
Yes. Okay. Which is the whole idea, isn't it?
Absolutely. The worst thing in the world is to go click, and the audience goes, yes, what's next? And the big screen comes up, and you go, as a presenter, you go, oh yes, and then you talk about the next thing, right? Well, if you've got presenter,
I've done that.
We've all done it. We've all done it. It just makes you look like you don't know what you're talking about, though. But if you've got presenter view set up, you can start talking about the next slide while it's in transition, because you've looked down at your laptop and you can see what's coming up. And I cannot begin to describe how much of a confidence booster it is, not just to have notes about the slide that's on the screen, but also to know what slide is coming up next, because it means you're never ambushed. You're never going, what's next? There's never any panic about it. It's all quite slick and straightforward.
Yeah. So it gives you control.
Yeah.
And confidence, and you well, it's pacing you as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. One of the things that we put, and this is getting away from nerves a bit, but one of the things that we put on our notes is, as we rehearse it, we make a note of how far through the presentation we would expect to be at any given slide.
Right.
And we put that in our notes. So, maybe if we're showing slide 6 out of 17 or something, for if it's a particularly long presentation, by the time we get to slide 6, there's a little note appears on our screen that says, by slide 6, you should be showing this slide at 4 minutes into the presentation. Let's say, I'm making these numbers up. And if you're running late, you know what to skip out. If you're running slow, you know that you can take your time, and that kind of jazz. And it just gives you that little bit more control over what's going on. So I wouldn't say you're never ambushed. You are less often ambushed.
Right.
Things can go wrong for the best of us. I've lost fuses and all sorts of things in the past. Things could go wrong, but the less things that can go wrong, the better. Now, there's a mind-boggling, stupid statement to make. The less things that go wrong, the better. Yeah, let's try and be more professional and profound than the fewer things. It's not even grammatically correct, is it? It's not the less. It's the fewer. The fewer things that go wrong.
What you said earlier, the other things that can go wrong, you do a checklist.
Yes.
And you make sure that everything that you expect to be in place is in place. So you should the times and flies. See, I've remembered it.
Yep.
It stuck in my mind for some reason. And that's the sort of thing, preparation beforehand, knowing your topic, and then you've got through the show, and it comes to questions and answers. And that's something a lot of people would be afraid of.
Yeah, okay, loads of things to suggest here. The first is, if you are ever ambushed by a question, it serves you right. And I can hear people all over the world going, what? As I say that. But I strongly advise people, once you've devised your presentation, when you know what it is, to be honest, you are going to know what most of the questions are going to be. Let's be brutal about it. You might not know the actual wording, but you're going to know what the questions are going to be, because your presentation, frankly, should address the most common questions that people are going to have.
Right.
So what you're left with are the second most likely questions that people are going to have about this topic. And the process of designing your presentation means that you should have this stack of index cards. Oh, I've got a pile right here.
All right. Okay.
These are Post-it notes here where I'm designing a presentation. I've left it a little bit late, to be honest. I'm designing a presentation for Thursday. I've got a big pile downstairs of index cards laid out. What questions am I expecting? How do I answer those questions?
Right. Okay.
I've got an hour on stage to answer as many of those questions as I can in my presentation. But those questions that I'm not going to include in my presentation, I've got a pile of them. I know them. I know what's going to come. Okay.
Right.
Or at least I know the majority of them. So here's a dirty trick. Now you know what the most likely questions are going to be. You prepare a slide that answers that question. and you took it at the end of your presentation.
Okay.
So that if somebody asks you that question, you can then go, good question. Click, click, return, and your slides then jump to the slide where you've got the answers to that question prepared. Now, you don't have to have anything on the screen if you don't want. You could just have a black slide if you want to be really cool about it. Have a black slide, but have on your notes the answer to the question.
Yes.
So all those things where you can't remember them, the notes are on there, and you can talk to them. But if you want to be really slick about it, and I mean this is really slick about it, that question that slide there where you've got the question answers to on it, in front of that you have a black slide, and instead of jumping to the slide number with the answer on, you jump to the black slide in front of it, and then go from the black slide into the answer slide, so it elegantly fades just like it's supposed to do. Because if you type in 42 return, PowerPoint crashes to slide 42, and it's obvious that you've jumped around because it's a bit of a square wheel. But if you go to 41, which is a black slide, right, so you've gone from a black slide to another black slide. Nobody knows. All black slides look the same. And then you hit return again. So you go from 41 to 42. You elegantly fade in slide 42, and it just looks so slick because the audience don't see all the hard work. They don't see you going, oh, hell, what number is that? 32. Click, click, return. They just see you tap the keyboard, and then magically the right answers appear on the slide behind you. So basically what I advocate people do is just figure out what the most likely questions are, and prep the half dozen most likelies. A bigger problem, to be honest, is people not asking questions at all. You go, any questions? Tumbleweed.
Right. Well, let's take two scenarios then. What do you do in a tumbleweed scenario? Have you failed?
Either you failed, or your audience is nervous, or you've answered the question so brilliantly that there's no questions left to answer. So
that's obviously
that's the one obviously I'm aiming for. Yes, clearly. It could just be that they don't want to be seen to be stupid, or it could be that your presentation, and here's the one that annoys me, drives me around the bend. It could be that your presentation is so bad they just don't know where to start.
Right.
Now, that happens sometimes. We've all seen that kind of presentation. And rather than tell your boss that his presentation was absolutely god-awful, you just go, and don't ask any questions. And that drives me absolutely around the bend. However, assuming that you're a grown-up and you want to help your audience, you can either plant questions with people, which is
seed it.
Absolutely plant. Or you could even say to people, the questions that most people ask me in this circumstance are, or you would say, there's a slide that I didn't include here about so-and-so. Would that be of interest to anybody? People are more likely to put their hands up and go, yes, I'm interested in this, than they are to actually volunteer the fact that they're interested in something. So there's plenty of things you can do about it. You can plant the questions, or you can ask the questions of yourself. But the last thing I want you people to do is panic. Right? Just because they're not asking questions does not mean you have failed. It could just mean that they're shy. It could mean that culturally there's a problem, an issue. It could be that the microphones aren't working. It could be that you've just got a bunch of introverts in the audience.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, but what's the central purpose of a presentation?
To change the world.
Good answer.
There you go. That was a really short answer to change the world. The reason most presentations fail, in my experience, to be honest, is because the presenter doesn't know exactly what it is they're trying to change. Right. And they vaguely go, oh, I've got to make a presentation about new policy X. Right?
Yeah.
Well, so what? The actual presentation shouldn't be about policy X. The presentation should be so that people at the end of the presentation adopt policy X. Okay. So you're not just talking about the new safeguarding policy. You're not just talking about the new legal position. You're not just reporting on progress for this project or other. What you're doing is giving people information and giving them a call to action so they know what it is that they need to do. Okay. So, for example, I literally last week was working with somebody who said, my presentations are boring. They're all about safeguarding. Nobody cares about safeguarding.
Right.
I'm going, really? So nobody in your organization cares about children being safe. Oh, no, of course they do. Well, right. But they just don't care about the presentation. They don't care about the policy. And people didn't see how or why that applied. So what you should be doing is thinking, I'm not talking about the policy. I am talking about making children safer.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing is giving them the information about the policy so that, and there's the key word, so that, key phrase, sorry, so that people adopt the policy. Because what she was doing was just going, okay, here's the policy. And people were going, so what? What she should be doing is going, here's the policy so that you adopt it, so that children are safer, so that whatever your presentation is about.
So you're actually enabling people to do something they couldn't do before.
Yeah. And my bugbear is that people just talk about stuff. They panic and go, what do I know? And they just throw information at the audience without thinking about what it is that they're trying to tell people, exactly what it is they're trying to change. And we have an exercise in our live training, which we call the Twitter test, which is to say to people, by the end of the presentation, what is the one thing that needs to change? What is the one thing about the world that your presentation will have changed? It could be a tiny thing. And can you express that in something as succinct as a tweet?
Right.
Now, it doesn't have to be literally 140 characters, but the gist of it's an exercise to make people think, right? By the end of the presentation, how will the world be different?
Right.
What will have changed? And it's just a little way of forcing people to focus their brains on it. And to be honest, it also helps with nerves as well. Because one of the reasons that people are nervous is because they don't know what the hell they're doing or why they're doing it. And they can't measure success. Because if you don't know what you're trying to change, all you can measure are the things that went wrong.
Yeah, I gave a good speech, but nobody clapped.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. What was so what was the point of the speech? Well, in which case the speech was a failure. But what I'm saying is you now know whether your speech was a success or not by going, I know exactly what it is I'm trying to change.
Yeah.
And at that point you can measure success, which means that it is theoretically possible now to have a successful presentation. Whereas if you don't know what the hell it is you're trying to change, by definition, you can't have a successful presentation because you don't know what you're trying to, you don't know what you're trying to change. And all that sits in your head is, oh, I made this mistake, I made that mistake, that person looked bored, that person asked a stupid question, my boss wasn't paying attention, so, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Now you've got something to combat that. And it really kind of helps, hugely helps.
Yeah.
Or at least I find it helps.
Yeah, you're actually building a toolkit, which, I better use the correct word here. You're actually building a process which allows people to present effectively without nerves. Sorry, with some nerves.
With some nerves, you can be as nervous as you like, so long as you're also confident. That's the key thing. Again, I'm nervous now, but I'm also confident because I know I've got good. I've also got good material. I'm nervous because I don't know what your next question is going to be. I'm confident I'm going to be able to make up an answer for it. It's a balance between the two.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. The question I missed at the beginning was, can anybody present?
Yes. A better question is, can anybody present well?
Okay, right. Okay, let's go with that one.
It's like anybody can breathe and anybody can kick a football. It doesn't mean that everybody can sing opera and everybody can play for England. Okay, it's right. So everybody can do it. The question is whether people can do it effectively. And I would argue almost yes. There's always going to be a fringe of people who can't quite bring themselves to do it. But I've never yet trained anybody who I haven't, at the end of the day, who hasn't been able to go, I can now make an effective presentation. Some people never get confident at it, but you can always get effective. Right. So there's a whole bunch of tools. For example, I've not talked about any of the tools for mitigating nerves in the room. We've talked about preparation. We haven't talked about the tools in the room. So we haven't talked, for example, yet about Amy Cuddy's Power Pose stuff, or any of Alice Woodbrook's stuff about recognizing nerves and all of that kind of jazz.
Right,
okay. Have you come across Cuddy stuff? It's really fantastic. You not come across it? Amy Cuddy, she's an American researcher.
Yeah.
She's done a TED talk which is worth watching. She's a little bit irritating because she breathes in an annoying way. But basically, she observed that when people are nervous, they curl in on themselves.
Yeah.
And she hypothesized that perhaps it works in the opposite direction as well. Sometimes that curling in on yourself makes you nervous.
Right.
If that's true, then it might be that this idea of standing, confident people stand expansively. It might be the case that standing expansively also makes you feel confident. Okay. So she did a shed load of testing on this, standardizing for how much the position hurt. So she stopped people in different poses and all this kind of stuff. Standardized for how silly you felt and all of that kind of jazz, and came very clearly to the conclusion that standing in certain power poses makes you feel more confident. And the most famous of those power poses is the archetypal or stereotypical Wonder Woman pose. Do you know the?
Yes.
If you're a comic fan, you know the way it's kind of legs apart, head up, and your hands on your hips with your fists into the side of your hip bone. And you feel like a right prat doing it.
I feel more confident now. Yeah, it works.
You feel like a right idiot. I recommend you don't do it in front of the audience because it looks a bit stroppy. But Cuddy's suggestion is that you do it before you go on stage. So you go and you go and lock yourself in a toilet cubicle somewhere, and you just stand there for 2 minutes, and away you go. I find it works. It's just a bizarre, stupid way but it genuinely works. And then there's Alison Wood Brooks' idea where she's done a whole load of research, again, an American researcher. And she's observed that one of the problems with trying to control nerves is because nerves are a high energy state. And when you control nerves, you're trying to artificially get to a low energy state. Okay? And your brain knows it's being lied to. Okay? It knows, no, seriously, I am nervous. Stop pretending I'm not. I've got adrenaline. You're lying to me. Okay? So what she suggested is that instead of trying to go down from high energy to low energy, you go across from bad high energy to good high energy.
Okay.
And the way she found of doing this that was so simple, it's embarrassing to tell people about, is literally to say to yourself out loud, I'm excited about this.
Right. Okay.
All that does is change the I am nervous high energy to I am excited high energy, if you see what I mean.
I've been telling myself that all morning, looking forward to seeing it.
So you know how people, when they're nervous and their friends with the best will in the world come up to them and go, "Are you okay? Are you ready?" And your response is to go, "Well, you're nervous, so you want to manage expectations, so you kind of go, "Ooh, yeah, well, I'm a bit nervous." Her idea is instead of doing that, you just go, "Yeah, do you know what? I am. Things could go wrong, but I've prepared." And I'm excited about it. So every time you would normally say the word nervous, you say the word instead excited. And it sounds too simple to be true, but it kind of works. But I don't want people to get the idea that just because it's simple, it's easy.
Right.
It's saying replace the one word with another sounds really easy, and it's not, because your mindset is very, very nervous. It's a simple tool, but not an easy way. It's kind of like, actually, I'll tell you what, Steve, have you ever tried to lose weight?
Yes.
Okay, so what are the 2 rules about losing weight?
Exercise more, eat less.
Right, move more, eat less. Absolutely. Couldn't be more simple. How easy is that?
The most difficult thing in the world.
Absolutely. Anybody who's tried to lose weight recognizes that it's really tricky. Sorry, I've just seen that Maven UK has just asked for a link. Is that a link for the Amy Cuddy stuff?
It was, to the TED talk.
Okay. I'll try and put that in later on. Either that or just buy a copy of my book, and it's all linked in there. He says, honestly, I don't even have a copy to hand to wave at people. That's how bad I am at marketing. No. Link for the book then. Presentationgenius.info. There you go.
Right. That was easy.
That was easy. I've got that one in my head. But don't worry about it. I'll find a link for the Amy Cuddy thing. Or if you go to TED.org and just do a search for Amy Cuddy, she comes up. Right. In fact, I might be able to do that right now. Let me go to TED.org.
Okay, well, whilst you do that, we're enjoying this afternoon talking with Simon. It's always a chat more than an interview. And we've been talking about presentation nerves. And Simon's going to put a link in a moment to the YouTube video he referred to. And at the end of the session today, before we close down, we'll put a link to Simon's book. He's not here to market the book. That's
there you go. Well, no, honestly, there you go. There's the TED talk. That won't take you actually to talk. That takes you to a transcript of the talk, but you should be able to find it. You should be able to find it from there. Now, being a scientist, what I've done is I've gone back beyond that, and I've actually read the original research papers. And what I can do is show you. I can show you the research. There you go.
Ah, right. Okay. Yes.
There's the research papers. I can show you those. So there's more work behind that than you can shake a stick at, and that's just the research that I've printed off. I try very hard not to print things, obviously, to save paper, but that's the stuff that I've printed off for reading on trains, or because it was so complicated I couldn't read it on the screen. So yeah, there's a load of stuff behind that, and that's the Amy Cuddy stuff, and then the Alice Woodbrook stuff is just the saying you're excited rather than saying you're nervous. And again, I'll dig out a tip for that, and I'll attach that to the YouTube video or something when we find that, when we get to the end of the Blab. Okay.
Yeah.
But there are other kinds of tools like have I mentioned? I've not mentioned the peripheral vision technique at
no,
either, have I? Okay. This is a great one. Okay. There are people that don't do this if you're driving. Okay, this is not going to work if you do, because it's a dumb idea, right? One of the things that happens when you're nervous is that your body goes into fight or flight, and a whole bunch of hormones, including one called cortisol, kicks in, and that narrows down the range of things to which you pay attention. Now, from an evolutionary perspective, that makes perfect sense, because if I'm frightened of something, I want to get as much information about that thing. Okay, right. It doesn't help if you're making a presentation, though, because you can't hit your audience and you can't run away from them, right? So fight or flight doesn't work. Well, you can hit them, you can run away from them, but I don't recommend it. But so you're left with this fight or flight thing where your brain goes and it narrows down onto the only thing in the room that's frightening.
Yep.
That makes sense? The only thing in the room that's frightening is your audience.
Indeed.
So there's an exercise you can do, and I'll not do the full gist of it here, but basically it's to just become consciously aware of your peripheral vision by moving your arms out, and I need to stand up and stuff, but just become consciously aware of your peripheral vision. So as you face your audience, instead of going, here is my audience in a room, you are now aware of everything else that's in the room. So you're now going, here is a room full of things. Sure, yes, one of them is nervous, one of them is scary, but I can see at the corner of my eye, I can see the door. That's not scary. Over there at the corner of my eye, I can see my laptop. That's not scary. I'm aware of the lights. That's not scary. The data projector. That's not scary. The handouts. They're not scary. The spare seats. They're not scary. All of these things are not scary. So I'm sitting in my office now. Out of the corner of my eye, even though my screen's making me nervous, out of the corner of my eye, I'm aware of the case for my glasses. And over here, I'm aware of I've got 2 printers, and I'm aware of the fact that over here there's none of these things make me nervous. So I've diluted the effect of being nervous because of the camera in front of me by becoming aware of lots and lots and lots of other things around me that are not nerve inducing. Nerve inducing, is that a real word?
It works for me. That works for me as well.
Yeah, you know what I mean. So you concentrate on your hands, and then you swing your hands out in an arc, leaving your eyes focused on that spot in the air where your hands were, until your hands get to the edge of your peripheral vision. Okay, it's not clear. My camera's not going to show you because my hands are too far out there, but you can see you can see. Which is why I say don't do this if you're driving. Okay, so this is not going to work. Letting go of the steering wheel, not a good plan.
Indeed. Right. Now, if anybody would like to come and ask Simon questions on air, you're more than welcome to do so. Just press the call-in button and you can join us, and that applies to anybody who's logged in and watching today. If you're not logged in, then you can log in with Twitter and you can join us and ask questions direct.
Can I just check? My screen says that bottom seat is locked. Can people join in if that seat is locked?
It should say above that open seat, lock seat.
Okay, right. Okay.
You can link anywhere.
So the seat is open, right?
Yeah, because we can drop things in now, but not while we're recording, because people who are watching the video wonder what we're talking about.
Fair enough. Yeah.
You know,
So if anyone, anyone's got any questions, more than happy to tackle questions and to take those on.
Okay.
I'm also happy to go away and have a cup of tea if nobody's got any questions. So I'm quite easy.
Right. Well, shall we close this part of the session then? If you'd like
Sure.
to say your words to the people.
I don't really have any words to add to that.
No? Okay.
I'm more than happy to take questions, but if you want to, I'm happy to go on. There are a zillion tools for dealing with nerves. Do you want me to give you a couple of others?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My personal favorite then. Okay, it's called anchoring. It's one of the few bits of neuro-linguistic programming that doesn't make me want to absolutely scream at the neuro-linguistic programmer, and that's partially because neuro-linguistic programming nicked it from somewhere grown up and sensible.
Okay.
I want you to imagine, Stephen, okay, imagine what I'm going to call your R moment, and that is something that happens to you frequently, regularly, more or less the same time every day, that makes you just go, do you know the kind of thing I mean?
Yeah, 5 o'clock when the phone stops. Yeah.
That kind of thing. Or for me, it was when I was working at a university doing research, and I was working 12, 14-hour shifts and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I used to walk around the corner to my house, and in fact, I can feel it in my head now. On the left-hand side of my street, there are half a dozen houses where friends live. On the right-hand side of my street, there's a beat copse, and at the end of my street, there's my house, and I could feel myself just going, okay, so that's my R moment.
Right.
And an incredibly powerful tool then is every time, and I mean every time, that R moment happens, you do something.
Okay.
Right? And that something that you do is called your anchor.
Right.
So just hold those two bits of jargon in your head for a second. Let me go back for a moment and remind you about the work of Pavlov.
Yes.
Pavlov's dog?
Yes.
Familiar with this? Okay. So the idea is that every time he fed the dogs, he rang a bell. Feed the dog, ring a bell. Feed the dog, ring a bell. Feed the dog, ring a bell. Until he got to the point where he could get the dogs to salivate just by ringing the bell.
Yeah.
Now, you can probably join the dots up yourself already here, because that R moment, that's a hormonal response that you're having, just like Pavlov's dogs had a hormonal response. Their hormones were salivary.
Mm-hmm.
Our R moment hormones are the serotonins and the feel-good hormones, but nevertheless, they are still hormones. And we are slightly harder to train than dogs because most people are slightly smarter than most dogs. That's not a universal truth, however. I've known some very, very smart dogs and some very, very dumb people. So what you do is, when I say you do something, every time you have this R moment, that's called anchor, and it's your equivalent of Pavlov ringing the bell.
Yeah.
You with me? Is that making
sense? That's making sense, yeah. So what sort of thing?
Eventually you get to the point where you can do your anchor, just like Pavlov got to the stage of ringing the bell. You get to the point of you do your anchor, you do your thing, and your body reflexively has this hormonal response, just like Pavlov's dogs do. Okay.
Yeah.
So personally, what happened is that every time I walked around that corner and I saw my house for a few weeks, I went, and every time I did that, I rubbed the inside of my wedding ring with my thumb.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So now, before I go on stage, I just rub the inside of my wedding ring with my thumb, and my body, I can't say floods with those hormones, but it has a hormonal response that calms me down in the same way as seeing my house calms me down. One note of caution before I stop on this one. I cheat, okay? I don't recommend that people attach themselves to a physical anchor.
Right. Okay.
Because as sure as grass is green, at some point, if you anchor to your favorite tie or whatever, you're not going to be wearing your favorite tie at the point when you need it, right? So I recommend that people anchor to an action rather than an object.
Right.
And that action, in my case, is rubbing my wedding ring. But I'm okay with that because I never, ever take my wedding ring off.
Right.
Okay, the day I go on stage to make a presentation and I'm not wearing my wedding ring, I've got bigger problems than the audience. Like, I've got to figure out where the hell my wedding ring is, what the hell I'm going to tell my wife. why I took it off and all of that kind of stuff.
Right. Okay. So
so
anchoring is a powerful tool.
It's the most powerful tool I use, the most powerful tool I know. The downside of it is that it won't work immediately. You have to practice it for a while first.
Right.
But I use it all the time. Professional dancers and actors that I've worked with. I used to tour as a lighting designer for dance companies. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that in the past, but the dancers that I used to tour with and still work with every now and again, they use something along these lines. They actually, the part of their warm-up routine is to warm their bodies up.
Yeah.
But part of that warm-up routine is also their equivalent of an anchor and that kind of stuff. I spent 7 years touring as a lighting designer, which is more fun than any job has a right to be. It is also harder work than any job has a right to be, because you're doing 12 and 14-hour shifts, and it just does your head in. I don't mind doing 12 and 14-hour shifts. What I mind is doing 12 and 14-hour shifts for absolutely no freaking money. Because there's lighting designers and theatre technicians are just paid peanuts. Peanuts. So that's the most powerful tool I know. The downside is it doesn't work straight away. The peripheral vision one, that will work straight away. The ties and flies one, that'll work as soon as you've actually written your ties and flies list. In fact, I'll tell you what, Stephen, if anybody wants to email me and ask for our ties and flies, more than happy to give it to them. The downside, the note of caution about that, of course, is that our ties and flies lists won't be the same as anybody else's ties and flies lists.
Okay.
Sorry, go on.
So, but you best re-explain what the list is.
The ties and flies list. It's it's one I talked about right back at the beginning when I gave that checklist. Okay, so if anyone wants our ties and flies performance checklist, you get it. But to be honest, you're better off writing your own, because ours is different. Ours says things like Simon's microphone check, microphone battery check. Well, most people aren't going to be in that world, so you're better off writing. But if they want it, it's a starting point.
It's a template, a starting point, indeed.
It's a starting point, it's a template. And we've gone to the point now of printing ours and laminating ours so that we can go down with a felt pen and go tick, 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 tick.
Okay.
So how much presentation should be scripted and how much of it should be ad-libbed? The answer is nothing for either of those. Bear with me and I'll explain. A script sounds like a script. A pure ad-lib allows too much to go horribly wrong. So the best thing you're looking for is that compromise in the middle where you have rehearsed sort of what you're going to say, but not word for word, because that becomes sterile. And it also increases your nervousness as well, because you're worrying, have I remembered this? Have I remembered that? Have I remembered the other? Okay. The best analogy I can give you perhaps is that it's a bit like improvised jazz or improvised comedy routines. The actual lines that a stand-up comedian is delivering, they're rehearsed to the nth degree. All that's improvised is the structure that hangs around them and puts them together. So I strongly recommend that you have keywords that remind you what you're going to say, and you rehearse saying them, but that you don't actually have a literal script. And I'm aware of the fact that that sounds all kind of woo-woo and middle-of-the-road type stuff, Ken, but sorry, it's the best way of making your presentations that nice combination of feeling spontaneous but also being confident about it. Apart from anything else, makes sense. Apart from anything else, rehearsing a script takes more time than anybody in the real world has actually ever got. To memorize a script, to memorize a 20-minute script takes hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and is just massively stressful and depressing. And as soon as you go wrong, it all goes to hell in a handcart. So I recommend an improvisation around a structure. That doesn't really answer the question. So how much it should be scripted and how much should be ad-libbed? None of either. There you go.
Right. Okay, I think that answers it. If we go back to, say, something like Frankie Howard, he appeared to be totally spontaneous, didn't he?
He appeared to be spontaneous.
Well, he was spontaneous, wasn't he? Sorry.
No. He appeared to be spontaneous.
Exactly.
The famous example that everybody always quotes at this point is, Bring me sunshine. Blah, blah, blah. Morecambe, yeah. They would rehearse their apparent ad libs more than they would actually rehearse the scripted parts of their shows.
Okay.
Because in order to make it look like it was ad libbed and spontaneous, it just took so much work. Right? Because otherwise, if you don't get it right, it just looks like it's awful. Trust me, people can tell when you're not making it up on the spur of the moment. It just looks like you're a robot, and it's just horrible. And they lose faith in you because they know that you're not really in the room with them. So you're going to have to just take the risk, I'm afraid, Ken. And if I say make it up on the spur of the moment, that's not quite what I mean, but you kind of get it.
Are there any other techniques that we've not covered?
Loads.
But
we have spent an hour on this.
Well, we must do another show sometime then on that, because
my pleasure. Yeah, absolutely.
That would be brilliant.
Parting shots then.
Yeah.
Just remind people that nerves and confidence are not mutually exclusive.
Right.
You can be confident and nervous at the same time, and that's kind of what you're looking for. If you know your material, so you're confident in it, it doesn't matter how nervous you are. And the other thing to remember, of course, is just that nerves are normal. All the tools I've given you are going to help with your nerves, but just remember that nerves are normal and don't panic. And one last parting shot. Okay. One last parting shot. Nobody, trust me on this, right? Okay. Nobody notices. Honestly, nobody notices. You can screw up left, right, and centre, and nobody notices. Now, that's not literally true. Obviously, if your slides falls over, things are going to go wrong. But if anybody wants to look at some of the research on how unobservant people are, just read things like The Invisible Gorilla.
Okay.
And I don't think I'm giving anything away now because everybody knows the video, surely.
I'm sure they do.
But if you watch it... Sorry?
I'm sure they do. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So everybody knows that video of the people passing the basketball around with and they don't the gorilla. But the research behind that, there are whole books full of research behind that, and they're fascinating. They're really interesting reading. But there are bits of research behind that where, for example, halfway through a conversation, two people talking, halfway through a conversation, this people disappears and is replaced by somebody completely different, and this person doesn't notice.
Yeah.
So if you don't notice that they are talking to a different person, how unobservant are we really? Okay. So trust me, the audience doesn't notice nearly as much as we think they do. So long as the audience is getting the what's in it for them.
Yeah.
That's the key thing as far as the audience is concerned, and they're much more tolerant than we ever think they're going to be. The only people who celebrate the fact that I've screwed up on stage are people who are going to celebrate failure and misery. And to be honest, I've got better things to worry about than people who want me to fail.
Indeed.
There's an awful lot of those thinking about it, but
no, there are more people want to succeed than fail, which is fortunate.
And remember that.
An enjoyable hour, Simon. Thank you very much for joining us here on Blab.
My pleasure.
To everybody who's been watching, thank you. As we've just intimated, Simon and I will be back again. I do know that you're with Kevin on Friday, are you not, sir?
I'm with Kevin on Friday. Kevin Arrow, yes. That's not talking about nerves. That's talking more broadly about presentation. So I'll be talking about things. I guess, because he hasn't told me what the questions are. I guess we're going to be talking about things like presentation design, structure, slide design, and that kind of stuff. He may cover nerves, but if he does, I'll try and steer him away from it and point him. I'll just say to people to come back to this Blab.
We're all in the same team.
And, you say that, but I'm not getting paid. I don't. So yeah, I guess that one's going to be more about structure, design, slides, and all of that kind of. And I'm guessing, given how much I know about the man, I'm guessing he's probably going to be talking horror stories as well. There are bound to be questions such as, "What was your biggest cock up on stage, Simon?" And
yes, right, okay, right.
There have been some spectacular cock-ups on stage. I'll tell you, some spectacular cock-ups on stage.
Right. Well, we'll talk about those when we finish recording. Unless you want to put one in at the end, just to finish.
God no.
No, actually, there you are. I'm so kind.
Let's pretend that I'm a professional and I don't screw up.
Indeed. Well, you're on professional. And it's,
yeah, it doesn't mean I don't screw up.
Here with you. Thank you to everyone. I'm going to pause the recording now, and we'll be back during the summer, I've no doubt.